Hey, I'm Kevin, and this is HFX by Bike, a channel all about getting around Halifax by bike. I made a video about 7 months ago about the city's planned upgrades to the existing bike lanes on University Avenue and the intention of expanding the bike corridor down the rest of University and onto Morris Street and all the way down to the waterfront downtown. And oh boy, a lot has happened since then. As a quick recap, in June of 2025, the mayor put a motion to council to pause work on any new bike infrastructure in the city, citing increased costs and traffic impacts. This was defeated by council and replaced by a motion to consider the upgrades to the Brunswick Street bike lanes and University Morris bike corridor as individual projects. This passed, with council voting 12-5 to keep the upgrades to the Brunswick Street bike lanes as is, since the tender for that project was going to close the day after the vote was being held anyways. Council voted 11-6 to request a staff report on changing the design of Morris Street bike lanes to retain two-way car traffic, to be debated on July 8th in council. Some of the older, discarded plans for the bike network on the south end Halifax were resurrected and shown to council as they debated a course of action. I was going to do a whole spiel about the strengths and weaknesses of the alternate routes proposed, but I'm trying to keep this video relatively short. A picture being worth at least a few minutes of verbal detail, here's a street view of one of the proposed routes. Note the cyclist walking their bike up a steep incline. In any case, this was debated late into the night, and after the councillor for the neighbourhood, Laura White, proposed a compromise via a non-permanent installation of the default design to evaluate impacts and reduce costs, council voted 13-4 in favour of the original plan as a tactical build-out. But wait, there's more. The Premier of Nova Scotia, the province Halifax is situated in, also weighed in, stating that if the city installed bike lanes on Morris Street, the province would remove them at the city's expense for the sake of traffic, the economy, and public safety. Having the provincial government weigh in on the design of a medium traffic collector road is unprecedented as far as I'm aware, and I've had several people request a short video outlining the specific issues that each side has raised as a quick one-stop summary, and hey, who am I to say no? The original plan for Morris Street was to place a two-way bike lane on the northern side of Morris between South Park and Lower Water Street. Of the initial 10 designs, this was the one most in line with what people requested during the public consultation process. The main concern is around traffic, and this actually has a few different groups of issues bundled in it. There's the general flow of traffic through the area, which seems to be everyone's main concern. Then there's the access for freight. Morris is a daytime trucking route in and out of the downtown and towards the port, and making it one way would require an alternate route for trucks. That doesn't seem very complicated, but it's raised people's ire. Then there's transit. Morris has some low-frequency transit lines running down it, and is theoretically the backup route for transit when the main corridor in Spring Garden gets disrupted. No one is talking about that for some reason, but it's important to discuss. The disruption of other modes is real if Morris gets made one way, which raises an important question. Is it even necessary to make Morris Street one way for motor vehicle traffic in order to incorporate bike infrastructure? Before we do anything, let's figure out what assets we have to work with. Morris Street runs for just over 800 meters between South Park Street in the west and Lower Water Street in the east. Over that span, it intersects with three other major roads, Queen, Barrington, and Hollis. Based on measurements from satellite images, the section east of Queen seems to have a relatively uniform width of 10.1 to 10.3 meters. The section west of Queen, adjacent to the Schmidtville Heritage District, seems to be a little bit narrower in places, dipping down to about 9.8 to 9.9 meters. Past that, it would connect to whatever upgrades get applied to University Avenue, which no one seems to have a problem with, and therefore I don't need to go over again. That's what we have, so let's work through what we need to make everyone happy. The city has guidelines for how to build routine infrastructure, like a recipe book for municipal construction. I'm going to use it as, well, a guide for how much space we need to accommodate the different modes using Morris Street. The minimum recommended width for a two-way bike lane or multi-use path is 3 meters, or 1.5 meters per direction. The city has a handful of spots where it dips below this, typically on infrastructure sets like the McDonald Bridge, which were placed before the standards and are functionally impossible to upgrade. Dipping below 3 meters is possible, but it becomes quite narrow when bikes are passing one another, so let's keep 3 meters as the default for now. That's just the bike lane. We need a barrier to separate it from traffic. The two main options are prefabricated concrete barriers, which are about 0.45 meters wide, or a standard curb for an elevated bike lane, which is about 0.15 meters wide. If we do a tactical build-out with flex posts or something like a bollard, it would be more like the curb option. So let's round up and say that it's going to be 3.5 meters for the prefab option and 3.2 meters for the curb separated option. Next we have transit and freight. According to the city's design guide, these heavy hitters have the same minimum lane width between them of 3.3 meters in each direction. If you can't believe that such large vehicles can maneuver in such narrow lanes, don't worry, I brought receipts. Because the arc of history bends towards comedy, just days after the premiere declared that it was impossible for Morris Street to drop down to one lane, Morris Street dropped down to one lane to accommodate some pipework. I used a digital tape measure on my phone to measure the width of the temporary lane from curb to cone, which turned out to be about 3.1 meters. That seems about right to my eyes, so let's go with that. This is narrower than the city's recommended minimums for transit and freight, and narrower than what I'm pitching, so can they fit? A freight truck rolled by just as I was setting up to film and made it through with extra space on either side to spare. A couple minutes later, a regularly scheduled bus showed up to make its rounds. After taking a moment to align itself with the off-center lane, the bus likewise was able to make it through without any issues. So between the bike lane and the two-way traffic requirement, we need 9.8 meters for a curb or flex post separated bike lane, or 10.1 meters for a precast barrier bike lane. Going back to our inventory, either design can probably work east of Queen, with the smaller scale option acting as a backup. West of Queen, things are pretty tight. The prefab lane is probably off the table, and even the narrower curb lane is pretty borderline. We still have some options though. For that section, to the degree that it's really close, shaving a few millimeters either just off the bike lane or equally from all modes is probably fine if it makes the whole thing work. All the different user groups probably wouldn't even notice. Alternatively, if that's not acceptable, we have the option of pursuing a slow street strategy for this section. The premise of separated bike lanes is to protect slower moving, more squishable road users from faster, larger, encased in metal road users. We can partly negate the need for this simply by slowing traffic down between Queen and South Park Street. By sheer coincidence, the same section of road is actually a school zone with a speed limit of 30 kilometers an hour. Traffic studies show that the 85th percentile speed is closer to 50, so slowing down motor vehicle traffic near St. Mary's School is something the city should be doing anyways. There are a lot of different ways that we could go about doing this. My preferred approach is just to mimic the lane narrowing effects of the construction site from before, just, nicer. When I made my original video, I used a similar concept from a street in Utrecht in the Netherlands. The design there is to narrow the lanes with a central demarked space to allow a bit of grace for larger vehicles. This design can be trialed with paint and/or flex posts and scaled up or down more or less overnight based on the needs of the street. If we go ahead with a slow street model between South Park and Queen, then we need a way to integrate the bike traffic between it and the two-way lanes we hypothesized on the western section of Morris. That's going to be pretty awkward, so it might be easier just to make them one-way lanes on each side. That's going to increase the total amount of space needed in those sections because we need the extra barrier, bringing us to a total of about 10.2 meters for all road users to be accommodated. That's about the width of the existing road curb to curb in that section without any modifications at all. In short, I think a case can be made that it's possible to fit bike infrastructure along Morris Street simply by following the city's existing guidelines regarding lane widths and school zone vehicle speeds. On paper, it looks like we can do this while retaining two-way motor vehicle traffic just by following the city's own recipe for how we should build these kind of things, and by making small compromises when the size of the road doesn't allow us to do so. Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos all about getting around Halifax by bike. That's it for this one. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.